A conceptual storytelling image capturing the journey of life from a young girl to her senior years as she reflects on her moments and experiences. And this was my vision that when I first started to create this image. Creating the base image with an AI generator was a challenge, getting the prompts right. But in the end, I brought my vision to life and I knew it was an image that I wanted to work on. From there, it was time to work the magic in Photoshop and Nik Collection and refining the details and adding the final touches with colour grading and light. It's what I call a simple image with the colour grading and the light and the storytelling. Let's dive in and have a look at an image I've titled The Younger Self. Here is the base image that I started with, and I don't normally work in a monochromatic colour palette, but I felt that this is exactly what I wanted, that subtle hint of colour, but more in monochromatic tones. I've extended the canvas on the left-hand side as I felt it needed a little bit more breathing space, but this is the canvas that I start to work with. I'm going to come over to the layer stack and I'm going to click on the layers and explain the different techniques and layers that I used. The next layer is where I've used Gigapixel AI and I upscale all my AI generated images using Topaz Gigapixel. I find it's a fantastic tool to work with and it gives so much detail in the AI images that I create. I'm going to turn that layer on and I'll get you to have a look at the fireplace on the left-hand side as I turn this layer on, and you can see what it does with the detail. I'll turn that on and off, and you can see it just gives it a little bit more sharpness and detail in that area. Now the next layer is where I've done a stamp visible layer, and now I'm starting to look, what do I want to do with this image? I could have gone in and done a levels or a curves or a brightness and contrast, but I wanted to soften the monochromatic tones, and what I use to do that is Nik 7 Silver Effects. I'll turn the layer on and you can see it's just a very subtle shift, but let's have a look at the opacity. If I come up to here on the opacity slider and I turn that up to 100%, you can see it's a lot darker. I'll turn that layer off and on. And by just dialing down that opacity to 55%, it just softens those tones, which works for my eye. Let's take a look at Nik Collection Silver Effects and see what's available in this program. I'll come up to Filter on the menu bar. I'll go Nik Collection 7 and I'll choose Silver Effects. Now, while I'm waiting for it to open up, this is where I can come in and choose different presets or filters that are already in Nik, and there's so many to choose from. You've got also other options where you can play with different control points or different light, brightness and contrast. But let's come over here onto the left-hand side and have a look at some of the presets that are in here. Now, this is not a tutorial on how to use Nik Silver Effects. It's just a glimpse in what this powerful tool can do to your workflow. For example, I might want to choose something that's high structure smooth. Let's have a look. That brings up some detail, and that may be something that you want with your image. I'll scroll down and let's have a look at some other presets in here. And I could go fine art, high key. Again, I look at that and I think, no, that doesn't suit my vision, but it may suit different images that you're working on. I can choose a triste. I can choose, let's go down to wet rocks, which gives some real depth in those dark areas, and it can really enhance your storytelling. I can choose a soft sepia. It is a minefield when you're playing with all these different presets in Nik Collection Silver Effects. But I'm going to cancel out and continue now looking at the other layers that I worked on this image. The next layer that I did was a stamp visible layer. And the reason that I did that is that I wanted to now fix up the extended canvas on the left-hand side with Generative Expand. Like anything in Photoshop or other programs, there's many ways that you can do things, but I've generally, with this image, I've just used a stamp visible layer. I'll turn that layer on, which now allows me to work on the Generative Expand. I'll click on that layer and you can see now it's extended the canvas, and I felt that it just gave a little bit more balance or depth for my eye. The next layer is where I'll turn the layer on, and it's a stamp visible layer. The reason is I stopped and looked and I thought, is this where I want to finish? Is this all I want to do with this image, or can I do a little bit more? And I often get asked how do you know when to stop? How do you know when to keep going when you're creating an image? And sometimes it's just a gut feel. Sometimes you look at it and go, I'm done. I don't think I need to do any more. And then there's other times, let's push the boundaries and try some other techniques to see what it can do. The next layer, I use Nik Collection color effects, where I applied what I call a fog layer. And it wasn't that I wanted to have fog. It was more to use this technique to soften the image, to make it a little bit more softer in the color and give it a dreamy feel. I'll turn the layer on, and you can see now it's changed that tonal range. I'll turn that layer off and on. Now I felt that it's really made a softness to the image. Let's have a look at the blend mode. The blend mode is at normal, but the opacity is at 55%. Let's turn up the opacity to 100%. And again, I looked at it and I thought, no, that's too light for my eye. I didn't want it that light. Stopping and looking at your image when you're in your workflow can help you think and process what is it that you want with your image. What kind of mood? What kind of atmosphere? Can you tell a story with elements or with colour? And this image was telling a story, but it was also done telling a story with colour. And my vision is that I wanted a little bit of light, but I also wanted some darkness, some atmosphere into this image. On this layer now, I've got the tones that I'm after, but I felt it was a little bit too light. Now I could have gone in and adjusted with the levels or a curves or a brightness and contrast. There's a few techniques that I could have used, but what I wanted to do was infuse some light into this image, but I didn't want to make the image light overall. Let me explain. The next layer is where I use an atmosphere overlay. And this is a technique that I'll use quite often just to add in subtle light. I'm going to turn that layer on. Let's have a look at the overlay. I've also done some masking here, but I'm going to have a look at the blend mode, and I'll come up, it's on soft light, and I'm going to change it to normal, and I'm going to change the opacity to 100%. I'm going to disable the mask, and you can actually see this is what I call an atmosphere overlay. And these are going to be available in my shop within a short time. And I use these overlays just to change the tonal range and add what I call some shaft of light in there. Let's enable the mask and get it back to where it is sitting. Now let's turn that layer off and on. By adding that overlay, it's given me that darkness, but I still have some light and shadow into it. And I'll just turn that back to soft light on the blend mode. And I've got those beautiful soft blue tones coming through now I've got that shaft of light coming on the right-hand side with the window, the light on the little girl, and then the maturer self looking down at that little girl. And I think that overlay just gives it what I'm after, the atmosphere, the mood, with a combination of light and shade. I'll go to the next layer, I'll turn that on, and that's just a stamp visible layer. The reason is I think I'm finished. But wait, as the saying goes, there's always more. And what I've done is used a colour tint that's in my shop, and it's a tint collection and it's an action. I'm going to turn that layer on and off. And the reason that I chose this tint, it's called Blue River, and you can actually see now it gets those subtle blue tones coming through the image. It's what I call a global adjustment. Let's turn that layer off and on. And that's how I build my depth in colour in my images. I can use a combination of different techniques such as a tint. I could use a preset. I could go into Nik and get some different effects. There's many ways that you can add depth of colour to an image. Let's reflect and have a look at this image, which I titled The Younger Self. And I'm happy with the way that I've pulled a story together, and then how I used different techniques combining with Photoshop and Nik Collection. The story to me is about that young girl looking at herself in the mirror and thinking, what is my future? What will happen in my life? Where the maturer person is now looking down at that young girl and reflecting on her life and saying, this is your time, I've had my time. This is what I love about being creative and creating digital art. It's a combination for me about storytelling, creating something that's fun and whimsical, but more importantly is being creative. Thanks for watching. I'll put some links in the description of the different products that I used in here, that if you want to have a look at my shop. But also, just to leave you with a quote, it's about having fun being creative.